Tonight we're going to read Saving Sweetness by Diane Stanley and Brian Karras. And I hope you really like this because this is a fun book that Dylan and Devin have had fun using in storytelling festivals. Okay. Out in the hottest, dustiest part of town is an orphanage run by a female person nasty enough to scare night into day. She goes by the name of Mrs. Sump, though I doubt there ever was a Mr. Sump, on account of she looks like something the cat drug in and the dog wouldn't eat. I heard that Mrs. Sump doesn't much like seeing the orphans resting or having any fun, so she puts them to scrubbing the floor with toothbrushes, even the ittiest bittiest orphan, little Sweetness. So one day, Sweetness hit the road. I found out right away because Miss Sump came a-bustling in to Loopy Lil Saloon, hollering like a banshee. "Sheriff," she yelled, that's me, "the provoking little the dear little child Sweetness done escaped. Disappeared. And I'm fit to be tied worrying about that poor little thing, all pink and helpless, wandering lost in the plains and stepping on scorpions and falling into holes and such. You gotta bring her back alive, safe, before she runs into Coyote Pete." Well, that did it. Scorpions were one thing, but Coyote Pete is as mean as an acre of rattlesnakes and the toughest, ugliest desperado in the West. So I got my star, and I buckled on my gun belt, and I headed west. It was hot as blazes. Seemed like the wind was too tired to blow. And then it got hotter. Hours passed with that sun beating down on me. I commenced to feeling thirsty. And that's when I realized that it would have been prudent to bring along some water. After some more hours, I begun to stagger with the thirst. And the next thing I knowed, I was plopped down in the dirt. Fortunately, I was in the shade of a big cactus, so I decided to stay there for a spell to catch my breath. Next thing I know, I felt this cool, delicious water trickling down my tongue. I popped open my eyes, and there, just a shadow against the sun, was little Sweetness and her big canteen. As soon as I was watered up enough to make words come into my mouth, I said, "Why, Sweetness, thank heaven I've saved you." She said, "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." That little orphan is just as cute as a speckled pup under a wagon. "Now I've come to take you back home," says I. "I don't want to go home," says Sweetness. "I'm tired of scrubbing floors with a toothbrush." "Well, that can't be cured, must be endured," I told her. Now I thought this was very sage advice, but the little orphan didn't seem to think so, because she just lit up like she was trying to catch yesterday. The day was going from bad to worse. Now I was going to have to save the orphan again. Also, if you know anything about the desert, you know that when the sun goes down in all its glory, it starts to cool off. And then it gets right cold. Also, the snakes come out. So I headed after Sweetness, all shivering and wishing I'd brought a blanket. I got to feeling a trifle hungry, too. Seems like I was wandering around among the snakes and the rocks for a long coon's age, till I was so tuckered I just curled up against a bush and went to sleep. Pretty soon I commenced to dream, and I was home in my own dear mama, sitting around there all toasty warm, and she was cooking something nice. Then I woke up, and there was the orphan and a campfire, and the little tyke was a-toasting marshmallows. "Want one?" says she. "Well, doesn't that just beat it all?" "Now looky here, Sweetness," I said to her. "I was gobbling down them marshmallows. This is the second time I have saved you, and I very much appreciate it if you'd stay saved. So we're going to mosey back to that there orphanage right now." Well, I'll be darned if she didn't start to cry. "Don't you like me?" she asked. "Why, sure I do, honey. Ain't I just saved you twice? There's nothing to cry about." But she went right on bawling. "I ain't got no ma," says she. "I ain't got no pa. All I got is Miss Stump and a toothbrush." "Well, ain't no way to fix that lesson you gets adopted," I explained. Then she smiled up in my face like she was expecting me to say something particular. It was too deep for me. "It sure is a dilemma," was all I could come up with to say, at which she throwed up her little hands in the air and stomped off into the night. "Dang," says I, "now you quit that. You really fry my patience." But I was going to bring that orphan back if it hair flipped the governor. So there was the sun rising over the plains, and there I was, feeling like something that was chewed up and spit out, trying to find one little orphan out in the big wild west. Now here comes the exciting part. I'd gone far enough to work up a good sweat, so I ambled over to a big rock so as I could stand in the shade, and that's when I heard the sound of a little click like a gun being cocked. I turned around to see what was there, but it was Coyote Pete, loaded for bear and giving me a look that would freeze a cat. I had to think fast. "Coyote Pete," I told him, "you can see by the star on my chest that I's here to uphold the law. Now you can't go around shooting folks and scaring orphans, and I's here to arrest you." Now it don't seem like he heard what I said, because he just, as cool as he could, he aimed his 6-shooter right at my big silver star. "Listen here, hamster brain," I says, "you're riding for a fall. You put down that gun or I'm going to knock you into the middle of next week. I'm going to snatch you bald-headed. I'm going to lock you up and throw away the key." Now you know what he done? He made a sound like thunk and fell over backwards, laid out cold like a sack of feed. I scared him that bad. And who would show up just at that moment but Sweetness? She took off her hair ribbons, and we tied that varmint up bulletproof and pig tight. "Now, Sweetness," I told her, "I ain't having no more of this running away. You can't go roaming around this here prairie with outlaws all over the place. It's too dangerous. How many times have I got to save you? If you was as smart as you was brave, you could figure out how to save me for good," she said, looking me right in the eye. There we stood, having a kind of staring contest. "What you leading up to?" says I. "Think," says she. So I chewed on it a while longer. "Do it have something to do with adopting?" "You're getting it," she says. I was starting to get a kind of pretty picture in my head regarding me and little Sweetness in a couple of rocking chairs by a fire. "Well, sweetheart," I says to her, "I know I's a rough character, but if you was to agree to it, I could adopt you." "Pa!" she says, and she fell on me like Grandma on a chicken snake. Then me and Sweetness rolled that varmint all the way back to town. Now here comes the ending. That very day, I done signed them adoption papers. And then that precious child told me about the 7 other orphans and how their toothbrushes was worn down to little nubs with all that scrubbing. So I adopted all of them too. As for Coyote Pete, we put him in jail, and I got a big reward for bringing that varmint to justice. After a few years, they let him out and put him in the custody of a parole officer. This was none other than Mrs. Sump, who, as you can see, was out of the orphan business. And I don't know how she done it, but she got that desperado to marry her, and now all he does is scrub that floor, and I can tell you he jumps when she hollers frog. And that's the truth. The end. Love you all.